Ross really wants here is to be the one that the aliens come for.
No, I do not.
They're going to read your column, and they're going to come and get you.
No.
Wouldn't they come for the unbelievers?
Oh, my God.
Be like, in your face, Connell.
Yeah, if I get alien probed, you're all in trouble. I am coming for you.
From New York Times Opinion, I'm Carlos Lozada.
I'm Michelle Cottle.
I'm Ross Douthat.
I'm Lydia Polgreen.
And this is Matter of Opinion. So this week, we're going to talk about aliens and alien spacecraft, because allegedly the government has been hiding important information from us. And of course, we'll also discuss our relationship with the government and what it means that we always think people in power are deceiving us about stuff like this. But first, let's start with the aliens. Now, Ross, you've written quite a lot about aliens lately. Why is this a story this week?
That sounds like a real advertisement for my column, Carlos. So, earlier this month, a former intelligence official, a relatively young guy named David Grusch, went public with the claim that the U.S. government has been secretly holding recovered alien spacecraft, quite a few of them, allegedly. And allegedly, it's part of a long-standing cover-up that dates all the way back to the 1930s, when the first of these crafts was supposedly, allegedly recovered in Mussolini's Italy.
I'm trying so hard not to laugh.
Well, so maybe you should laugh, but this is a little bit different from past revelations or claimed revelations about the U.S. government having recovered alien technology. For one thing, Grusch is an actual insider. He literally worked for the program that's supposed to be investigating what we now call unidentified aerial or unidentified anomalous phenomenon, UAPs. For another, it comes with a kind of background noise of other people making similar claims, usually anonymously, but making them to journalists and even to government officials. So just in the last week, Marco Rubio came out and said that he's heard from multiple people within the government similar allegations or claims to what Grusch has gone public with. So either you have a scenario, and I freely acknowledge this is a very unlikely scenario where some kind of cover-up actually exists, or you have a scenario which is quite strange in and of itself, where there's some substantial group of people within the government with security clearances who have either convinced themselves that this kind of cover-up is going on, even though it's not, or who are running some kind of psychological operation to convince you and me and, readers of the internet that the U.S. government has UFOs. And I think all of those scenarios are really interesting and worth paying attention to, even if, like Michelle, you reasonably find the idea of hidden alien spaceships and even alien corpses to be quite implausible.
It's interesting that there's this. First of all, I should say I'm deeply skeptical about the existence of aliens. I'm also deeply skeptical about the capability of the United States government to actually commit to and carry out a conspiracy of this kind and keep these kinds of things secret. However, I do think it's really interesting that this is an area of bipartisan fascination. Harry Reid, the late great senator from Nevada, legendary Democrat, Kristen Gillibrand, and of course, Marco Rubio. So it does seem to hook into something that all of us want to know about our government and what it's actually up to. And the two sort of options, they're covering up something huge, or they want us to believe that there's something here. Both of those beggar the question, why? Why?
What you're looking at wouldn't just be an American government cover-up. We're talking about a global cover-up, with tons of different factions agreeing that the one thing they're not going to do is let normal people know that the aliens are out there. I mean, it's like the idea that Mussolini was like hoarding alien spacecraft is just, like the...
Well, that part is surely plausible.
The Raiders of the Lost Ark having its, basement full of biblical supernatural artifacts that will melt your face off. It's just too good to fact check on some level.
This reminds me of an episode of the show South Park. It was about the 9/11 conspiracy theories. And the South Park kids all kind of like looked into it and, went all the way to Washington and the White House. And it turns out that the 9/11 conspiracy theories and all the conspiracy websites are themselves a government conspiracy, right? that the government wants everyone to think that it's all powerful. So it created this conspiracy about how it secretly planned 9/11, because otherwise they would realize that it's a bunch of idiots.
Well, there is this deep-rooted urge among people to just believe that there is something more out there, that we are not alone in this massive, sprawling, seemingly infinite galaxy. And so it turns so many of us into 10-year-old kids where we're just like, yes, E.T. is going to come and give me Reese's Pieces or whatever. I don't know. It speaks to something kind of fundamental in people that they want something more.
I mean, Ross, are you a believer? I mean, what is your kind of position on this question? I'm just curious because you're the one who's clearly spent the most time thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a definite position on it. I think you can divide the UFO phenomena usefully into categories. And category one is what we think of as sort of abduction experiences. And my view as of, say, 5 years ago is that these kind of accounts line up really well with a lot of pre-modern spiritual experiences that people had that were interpreted as demonic encounters, angelic encounters, and sometimes in the space age they appear as aliens because that's what we expect. But so that's level one. Then level two is the UFOs. People see weird things in the sky. Most of them are really weather balloons or passing jets or helicopters and so on. But there is a set of pretty weird sort of flying thing encounters that people have had and have been sometimes seen by large numbers of people. You can look at different cases on the internet if you're really bored.
And these are people who we trust with fighter jets and commercial airliners, right? These are not people who we normally think of as being unhinged.
Exactly. So this is the thing that shifted in the last 5 years. Sort of the backdrop to this whistleblower is that the military has started acknowledging that lots of military pilots have these encounters. And again, there are people... There's a guy named Mick West who's kind of made a career as a debunker of the footage that the military has put out. There's lots of arguments about, maybe all of these pilots really are just seeing other planes reflected in weird ways or sort of things that show up weirdly on the radar. But the military has basically acknowledged the breadth of this phenomenon in a way that hadn't been the case before.
Okay, let me jump in and just say this smacks to me of that the U.S. government and the military would much rather the American public think that there are aliens than have to acknowledge certain, say, weapons programs that they certainly don't want people to know are being worked on out there that might be even scarier than aliens.
So, Michelle, you're trading one conspiracy for another, right?
Absolutely.
You're saying
I have
that
no
it's
problem.
not that there's a conspiracy to hide alien life. No, there's like this deep conspiracy of which the alien life one's just a cover. There's this deep conspiracy of the military-industrial complex and the deep state that is hiding secret weapons programs that can defy the laws of physics. We can mock one conspiracy, but sort of like completely embrace the other, I guess.
The government has a fine record of keeping things like weapons programs or what our allies or adversaries are up to under wraps until they are forced or until it becomes convenient for them to share them. Whereas a global conspiracy covering up not just alien aircraft, but also alien carcasses, that's a bit more of a stretch for me, in part because I go back to what Lydia said. I don't believe that the capacity to maintain that kind of cover-up exists. I just think somebody would blow it.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, that's what I think too. While the recovered spacecraft theory does help you make sense of the weird objects in the sky and the weird abduction experiences, it really does not seem imaginable to me for all the reasons you guys have already sketched. That, for instance, the fall of the Soviet Union does not produce some group of scientists who decide we're going to become media heroes in the West by telling the New York Times all about the Soviet Union's secret reverse engineering of alien technology. No, that seems really implausible. But to Carlos's point, if this is a psyop, if it is like the 9/11 thing on South Park, the government just wants you to think they're UFOs so you never notice our drones or China's spy balloons for that matter, then for some reason that effort has escalated in the last 5 years. You need basically an explanation for why the government is willing to talk about this more. And then you still also need an explanation for this set of would-be whistleblowers. Are they deluded? Are they running a psyop? Or is there a spaceship? And I guess to play to the desire for belief in extraterrestrials, I think you have to raise the odds slightly. Michelle, I'm speaking to you. You have to raise the odds of alien visitors from 0.0001% to 0.01%. But you got to go up a little bit with all this weirdness, I think.
I think Michelle admits nothing.
I back down not 1 inch. I want the pictures of the aliens in the abandoned train car.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is this sort of interesting and slightly paradoxical tension that we have in American life between a kind of obsession with mystery, like matched with a desire for certainty. And there's this kind of push-pull of the American imagination thinking about what's out there in the universe and the limitless frontier, and at the same time wanting to nail down and fix every single thing that is possibly knowable. And I feel like this is one of those cases where it's just pulling apart in these two sort of seemingly contradictory directions. And that's in some ways where I sort of find myself is not really sure which impulse to go with.
Well, we work for the New York Times. Shouldn't we go with the knowability impulse? So yes.
Wait, I don't even know what that means.
Well, what it means is, in general, there's an unknowable question right now. Are there other alien civilizations somewhere in the galaxy? Are we alone in the universe? Yeah, that scale of question is sort of, at this moment, unknowable, and the desire to like pin it down and have some kind of certainty is just not, it's not going to be there. Whether this set of people who are literally talking to Senator Marco Rubio, what they have actually seen, whether they're lying to Rubio, whether they're deluded, whether they're all high on ayahuasca, that's a knowable thing. And we're a newspaper, and I'd like to know the answer. And I know, I'm not a reporter, so, that's why I'm on this podcast asking for answers. And I mean, speaking of podcasts, we should also say our colleague Ezra Klein did a long interview on just this subject with Leslie Kean, who was one of the co-authors of the story about the whistleblower. And I think if you listen to that podcast, Ezra does a really good job of sort of drilling down into all, the sort of Michelle Cottle side of the argument, all of the implausibilities you would have to accept to believe that we had 9 alien spacecraft. The other implausibility is that these have supposedly been farmed out to like Lockheed Martin for deniability so that the government can say, we don't have alien spacecraft. But then you're bringing in Lockheed Martin as part of the cover-up. Anyway.
That's something I find fascinating, that the belief in the existence of alien life is almost always wrapped up with the belief that the government's covering it up. The villain in the X-Files was never some scary alien. It was the cigarette smoking man, right? It was Alex Krycek. It was the syndicate. It was like these people from like the shadowy government that know everything and are running the cover-up. Trust no one is sort of from the very beginning embedded in the story. What I find so funny about that is that the mistrust in government always goes hand in hand with trust in someone from the government telling you the truth, right? Some little-known official from the lie-spouting government is sort of a set piece in the drama. Like, how do I know the government's lying to us? Because someone from the government told me.
Carlos, you have just basically defined Trumpism.
No. Do not put this on the doorstep of Donald Trump.
No. I'm not saying that Donald Trump came up with it. What I'm saying is the deep state idea has been around for decades and decades and decades. It's just that Donald Trump is the first one to get himself elected president on it because he's so good at tapping into that kind of gut-level paranoia in the American public.
Google founding fathers and Masons, and you'll find a long history of
so it's centuries of this stuff.
It's the Illuminati.
Look, guys,
the witch trials, Catholics as sleeper Vatican agents in America. It's the Red Scare McCarthyism, the Trilateral Commission. We've been good at this for a long, long time. This is not Trumpism.
I'm not saying it's Trumpism. Oh my God.
All I want to say is that just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean that they're not out to get you.
I mean, the deep state obviously exists, right? And paranoia.
The deep state has existed forever in the American imagination.
The deep state meaning in this case, the national security bureaucracy was formed primarily by World War II and its aftermath. The CIA and NSA did not exist in 1874. And, a lot of conspiracy theories center around events in which there is information that is withheld by the government. I guess, to me, the idea that there could be somewhere in the government one alien spacecraft that like 3 scientists are working on, but everybody else thinks it's a Chinese drone. To me, that's more plausible than what's being claimed, which is that everybody knows about the alien spaceships. I mean, that to me, like, I can believe a tiny group of people deep in the national security bureaucracy could keep one secret. It's the idea that, someone gets to a mid-level rank and people are like, hey, have you heard about the spaceships that we've got? That to me is the more implausible than just the sort of deep state.
Yeah, it's like 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. So
that's actually how this podcast ends.
Spoiler. So, okay, it seems we're all pretty skeptical as to whether there's a real government cover-up here. And yet, it's also clear that there's something very alluring about the notion of government conspiracies. Let's talk about that after the break. And we are back. So guys, why are we so in love with government conspiracy theories?
I mean, I think one of the things that I will just start out by saying is that, the government lies to us or fails to tell us things that are important. The most recent and egregious, to my mind, example of this was a lot of the debates around masking in COVID, right? Initially, the government said, no need to mask. And it turned out that they told us that because they were worried that in a very sort of nanny state fashion that people were going to go out and buy up all the masks and there wouldn't be enough left for healthcare workers. And I just think that kind of thing, that concern trolling, lying to people because you think that they can't handle the truth or can't behave appropriately, like just feeds right into this kind of conspiratorial state of mind that taps deeply into the American consciousness. And, there's examples like that. There's examples like Daniel Ellsberg, who leaked the Pentagon Papers. He just died. And it turns out that there actually was this huge conspiracy to hide from the American people the fact that the Vietnam War was going extremely badly and was a hopeless cause. A lot of people managed to keep that secret. There are just endless examples of places where the government either hasn't told us the truth or has behaved in a way that would definitely make you believe that they're not telling the truth. So, I mean, can we blame people for having this conspiratorial cast of mind?
And then you combine that with just a natural human inclination to dislike randomness and coincidence. And there's lots of research out there that indicates that people are more inclined to believe in conspiracy theories when they feel like they are oppressed or looked down on or on the outside of the system. So you just are asking for this sort of thing.
Do we think the internet has made people more conspiratorial? Or do we think it just reveals mindsets that you just, didn't observe before?
I think it fuels it. You get people a place to gather together.
And there's a connection to the point that you made, which is that the national security state is a post-war phenomenon. But I think also the internet is an outgrowth of the Cold War and the technological fight between the Soviet Union and the United States. And so all of these things, I think, sort of come together in a way that makes you think.
That feels like its own conspiracy theory.
You're saying that the internet itself is a psyop.
100. It's definitely
that's good. That's what I thought. I mean, I think one of the things that happened with liberals and the internet was there was this period when, basically Barack Obama's election and re-election, the Arab Spring to some extent, when there was this sort of narrative among my liberal friends that the internet was this great force for sort of truth defeating organized lies of various kinds. And then Donald Trump was elected, and suddenly it was like a switch had been flicked. And, the internet was the devil. Mark Zuckerberg was personally responsible for Trump's election. And that, I think, has sort of colored a lot of liberal views about, how to think about conspiracies, right? Because like what Lydia has been offering here, her sort of openness to deep state conspiracy theories, that, that's the traditional left-wing view, right? That like, look, there's a lot of conspiracies out there and, some conspiracy theorists take things too far, but we should be conspiracy curious. And I feel like liberalism right now is very against that sentiment.
And just from a practical standpoint, we are going through a period where it is the right end of the political spectrum that feels more ostracized and put upon and is more open to these sorts of things. And because of the Trump era, we did see kind of the way that the internet in particular could be a delivery mechanism. So you had just take the whole conspiracy about the election being stolen. It went from crazy chat corners like QAnon land to right-wing sites to more kind of mainstream sites talking about this and, Trump bringing these things up and asking if, you could possibly use these as a way to overturn the election. So you see kind of the mechanism by how these things are spread in these certain areas. If you wind up in a position where the left wing does this and we see a lot of these things pop up, we can pressure test the idea that is a problem, that just as big a problem as well. But like all the research right now shows it's more of a right-wing phenomenon with the conspiracy theory stuff.
All the research carried out by liberal academics, Michelle
Yes,
Cottle.
Exactly. It is all a conspiracy theory.
How would you distinguish that from, like, in kind, not necessarily in degree, from what you saw on the left in 2016? That, Trump won because of Russian troll farms and, Putin masterminded, if that's a verb.
They came up with the proof that Putin did meddle in the election. I mean, we're not talking about the outcome.
No.
Hillary lost the election.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Putin meddled in the election, but in a sense that was different from a lot of claims that circulated on the left after the election about sort of specific interventions.
But they did not pop up to the point that you had a large movement of Democratic congressmen on the Hill who voted not to. You see what I'm saying? They snowball.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I guess, I think, to me, I see the sort of bipartisan brainworms more around COVID. Like this whole trust the science and science is a kind of clear path that we're going to know exactly what to do if we just kind of follow the science, as if science was some concrete thing rather than like a method for trying to understand the world. And I do feel like it's interesting to me to see that there's this kind of horseshoe thing happening with people like RFK Jr. and others who identify themselves as being on the left and on the progressive end of the spectrum. This growth in anti-vax sentiment on the left and, people who, because of COVID, have a very different view of our healthcare system and of our government and the scientific expertise that comes out of our government because of the kind of cack-handed way in which the government handled information around COVID. Shows me that this is a bipartisan sickness. This is not something that only infects certain kinds of brains.
What's interesting about the vaccine stuff as opposed to the election fraud stuff, right, is that with the election fraud stuff, you can say, look, there's sort of a percolating conspiracy theory and then Trump elevates it. So if you went back to 2004, when a bunch of Democrats, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., argued that basically the GOP had stolen Ohio using voting machines. That conspiracy theory was present, it was influential, but John Kerry didn't embrace it and make it sort of a centerpiece of his argument. Trump does, and that's how you get election fraud theories leading to January 6th. But with anti-vaccine stuff, it's much more organic. So clearly there's some situations in which conspiracies sort of take off because they're given some kind of high-level imprimatur. Here's a question, though. What outre theory do you guys actually think is true? Or put another way, right? Like, what's a mystery that you want to know more about?
So I would take this more I take a step back from that, which is that I tend to believe that the government lies about a whole bunch of stuff. It hides a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not a radical transparency kind of partisan. I believe that there are things that the government probably should keep secret. So it's not that there's a specific conspiracy theory that I buy into. It's just that I just assume that the government keeps all kinds of things secret or lies about all kinds of things. And that's just the way it works.
My instinct is to just sort of assume not sort of nefarious conspiratorialism, but to assume stupidity. I think a lot of the government lying is not to cover up nefarious activities, to cover up embarrassment over stuff that they have done. That's what all the classification comes from. Most of it is classified documents are often trying to cover up stupid things we did that we hope you don't know about.
I have my sort of cast of mind is very sort of anti-conspiratorial, and I think it comes from a certain amount of comfort with uncertainty that is, for whatever reason, just a kind of perhaps congenital gift or defect, depending on how you see it. But I do think that this question of why we have this like constant desire to know and to fix with certainty what actually happened, and this inability to hold a complex set of facts about, the Kennedy assassination, or tolerate coincidences or explanations to things that just aren't ultimately satisfying and don't really make sense, but we could just maybe close the book on. That feels like such a deeply American characteristic, that this need to know. And I guess like part of me is like, maybe the truth isn't out there, and maybe that's okay.
No.
Oh, now you've broken Ross.
Well, we're just circling back to the same point. But look, one way or another, certain things are yes or no answers, right? Either COVID-19 leaked from a laboratory or it was spread zoonotically. Either Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or he didn't. Either Lee Harvey Oswald was the only gunman involved in the Kennedy assassination or he wasn't. I think a desire for clarity about those kind of things is not some sort of American fixation. It is a reasonable reaction to world history.
For me, it's less these big cosmic questions. Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone?
These are not cosmic questions. These are specific questions about historical events.
Cosmic is an inappropriate adjective. What I mean is it's less these hugely consequential single yes or no questions than so do you know that the Cubans that broke into the Watergate spent 4 days in Washington before they did it? What did they do? Did they do something else?
They went to the zoo.
Did they do other? No. Why would you?
Maybe they got a better fare. Maybe they got a better airfare by doing a Saturday night stay.
No,
put it off till the last
They
minute.
did something. They did something else here, and I don't know what it is, and I want to know. It's more the little filling in little pieces, little corners of the puzzle of history. That's what I'm more interested in.
Man's quest for meaning. I mean, this desire to, to quote the great Iris DeMent, maybe we should just let the mystery be.
Hear, hear.
Okay. Let's take a quick break there. When we come back, we will solve the mystery of who is getting hot or cold. Hey, Matter of Opinion listeners, we want your summer reading recommendations. What's on your list? Maybe it's something you've already read, or it's the book you're most excited to dig into while you're sitting by the pool this summer. Either way, tell us what you recommend for a great summer read and why by leaving us a voicemail at 212-556-7440. We'll put the number in the show notes too. And if you leave us a voicemail, we might share your recommendation in an upcoming episode. It's time once again for the moment we call Hot Cold, and one of us shares something that we're into, over, or somewhere in between. Who is hot colding this week?
I am. And Elemental, the new Disney Pixar movie, just came out, and it is a big flop. And it is one reason among many why I am cold on Disney. And I say this as someone who just took my family to Walt Disney World, and while I was there, I was sort of blown away by the power and majesty of Disney. And I walked out of Walt Disney World thinking, Disney will rule over American culture for 1,000 years. But honestly, if you look at the movies Disney is making, the money it's making off of them, the kind of creativity or lack thereof it's showing at the moment, it's in the worst shape that it's been in quite a while. Elemental was a flop. Little Mermaid, the latest live-action reboot, did okay at the box office, but like all of the live-action reboots, reflects a total loss of creativity. The big Disney movies of last year, Lightyear and Strange World, were both flops. So yeah, I'm much colder on Disney as a cultural force than I would have expected when I left its majestic parks behind a couple months ago.
I would just say that I find that to be true of the culture writ large, that we're not producing amazing creative new hits. We're just doing reruns of the same olds.
I wonder with Disney, if you get these intellectual properties and you build rides around them and worlds around them and merch around them, and then you just have to keep going again and again and again and squeezing them until there's not a drop of life left in them.
Right. And the success of Disney, a lot of the success that even built the park system as it exists now came from buying other successful franchises. So I totally agree with Lydia about the general decadence of our culture. I just feel like someone has pushed the accelerator on it for Disney in the last few years.
And Ross, didn't you write a book called The Decadent Society? So
yes. I'm just talking my own
book here. You're just plugging
here.
that. I would expect you to side with Lydia about the overall decadence of our culture.
I'm just saying you can see it sort of deepening in real time. So yeah, I'm making the usual argument. But briefly, the park experience made me think, no decadence here. They're building, they're building amazing new rides.
Waste our Royco. There's always money in the banana stand. Oh, that's a different show.
That's a different family drama.
All righty then.
All right. With that, we will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Matter of Opinion is produced by Phoebe Lett, Sophia Alvarez-Boyd, and Derek Arthur. It is edited by Stephanie Joyce. Our fact-check team is Kate Sinclair, Mary Marge Locker, and Michelle Harris. Original music by Isaac Jones, Carol Saburo, Sonia Herrero, and Pat McCusker. Mixing by Carol Saburo. Audience strategy by Shannon Busta and Christina Samuelewski. Our executive producer is Annie Rose Stresser. I'll give you a conspiracy theory right now. What are the two agencies that David Grusch worked for in the intelligence community world? He worked for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. Those are two of the agencies specifically listed in the Trump indictment in the documents case.
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun.
About, whose documents had been revealed or implicated in this. I'm just saying.
You just blew my mind.
Saying.
Once again, by reading the entire indictment, by reading, Carlos Lozada has cracked the case.